I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Johnson, 40 years old, and I built my career from quiet work no one ever saw but everyone depended on. For years, I supported family who never understood the weight of what I carried. But when my aunt mocked me in front of a room full of people, calling me a secretary, while her SEAL son sat right there, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by someone you'd gone out of your way to protect? If you have, tell me your story in the comments. You're not the only one. Before we get into what happened, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being underestimated, hit like and subscribe for more stories about boundaries, respect, and reclaiming your worth. What happened next might surprise you. I sat at Marjorie's dining table, running my finger along the rim of my wine glass while she arranged serving dishes with the precision of someone who'd hosted this meal 100 times before. The roast was perfect. The napkins matched the tablecloth. Everything about the evening screamed careful orchestration, which should have been my first warning sign. Sandra, honey, would you pass the rolls? Marjorie's smile was warm, practiced. She'd been my aunt for 38 years, my second mother for most of them. Tonight felt different though. Something in the air had shifted. Nathan sat across from me, his sealed trident gleaming against his dress uniform. He was home on leave, still carrying that quiet intensity that comes from operating in places most people can't pronounce. He'd been watching me since I arrived, his expression unreadable. Not hostile, just careful. Alert. So Sandra, Marjorie began, her tone bright and conversational. Still doing the admin work at the base? I took a slow sip of wine. I run operations. There's administrative work involved, but that's not the primary function. Oh, of course. She waved her hand dismissively. I just mean, desk work. Not like Nathan's job. He's out there really serving. Nathan's jaw tightened slightly. I caught it because I'm trained to catch micro-expressions, subtle shifts in body language that signal discomfort or danger. He knew something his mother didn't. Different roles require different skill sets, I said evenly. The military needs both. My mother, Elaine, reached for the potatoes with a little too much enthusiasm, trying to redirect. This roast is delicious, Marge. You'll have to give me the recipe. But Marjorie was already committed to her trajectory. I'd seen this pattern before over years of family dinners and holiday gatherings. The subtle comparisons. The gentle minimizing of my career while Nathan's accomplishments took center stage. Usually I let it slide. Tonight felt different. I just think it's interesting, Marjorie continued, how some people handle the dangerous work and others handle the paperwork that supports it. Both important, of course. Nathan set his fork down. Mom. What? I'm just saying Sandra has a nice, safe job. Nothing wrong with that. I could have corrected her then. Could have explained that my last 3 deployments took me to places where one wrong decision meant body bags coming home. Could have detailed the operations I'd planned and executed, the intelligence that prevented attacks, the networks I'd dismantled piece by careful piece. Instead, I took another sip of wine. I do what I'm trained to do, I said. And you're very good at it, I'm sure. Marjorie's smile was indulgent, the kind you'd give a child who'd drawn a nice picture. Nathan's told me about some of his missions. Well, what he can tell me. It sounds absolutely terrifying. I'm glad you don't have to deal with that kind of stress. Nathan was staring at his mother now with something close to alarm. He knew. He absolutely knew, and he was trying to signal her to stop. But Marjorie Bennett had never been good at reading rooms. The stress in my work is different, I offered. More analytical. Exactly. Brain work, not physical danger. Much better suited to you. My mother made a small sound, something between a cough and a protest. She knew more than Marjorie did, though not everything. Security clearances create strange boundaries in families, invisible walls where information stops flowing. I looked at Nathan. He gave me the smallest shake of his head, a gesture so subtle his mother wouldn't have caught it. A warning. Or maybe a plea. How long is your leave? I asked him, changing the subject with the smoothness of someone who'd deflected thousands of questions in interrogation rooms. 2 weeks, he said, relief evident in his voice. Then back to Virginia. Still at Little Creek? Yeah, training pipelines keeping me busy. Marjorie laughed. Unlike Sandra's calendar. I bet you could take a vacation whenever you wanted. Actually, the operation tempo's pretty high right now, I said. I'm averaging 70-hour weeks. Doing what though? Marjorie leaned forward. I mean, really, what do you do all day? Nathan's training constantly, deploying, putting himself in harm's way. What's your typical day look like? The question wasn't innocent curiosity. It was a challenge wrapped in concern, designed to prove her point. I'd seen this interrogation technique used by amateurs who thought they were being subtle. It never worked on me. I can't discuss operational details, I said. See, that's what I don't understand. Nathan can't talk about his missions either, but we see the results. The medals, the commendations. I've never seen you in uniform, not once in how many years? 16? 18, I corrected. And my work doesn't generate public recognition. Convenient, she said, still smiling. Nathan's knuckles were white around his knife. Mom, you should drop this. Why? I'm just curious about what my niece does. She's been in the Air Force almost 2 decades, and I still don't really know what her job is. Doesn't that seem strange to you? No, Nathan said flatly. It doesn't. Well, it does to me. Some people handle real danger, real operations. Others shuffle papers and make it sound more important than it is. The room went very quiet. Even my mother, who normally played peacemaker, seemed frozen. I set my wine glass down carefully, making sure it made no sound against the wood. I run intelligence operations, I said, my voice level and professional. The paperwork is incidental to the actual mission work. Intelligence. Marjorie's tone made the word sound quaint. So you read reports? Analyze data? Meanwhile, Nathan's jumping out of helicopters and clearing buildings. Different missions require different expertise, I said. The special operations community relies heavily on intelligence support to be effective. Support, Marjorie repeated. Exactly. Supporting the real operators. That's what I mean. You support people like Nathan who actually do the dangerous work. Nathan's voice cut across the table. Mom. Stop. What? I'm complimenting her support role. You're embarrassing yourself. Marjorie blinked, clearly not expecting her son to push back. I'm just being honest about the difference between combat roles and desk jobs. You don't know what you're talking about, Nathan said. I know my son is a Navy SEAL who risks his life, and my niece works in an office. I could have left it there. Should have, probably. Let Nathan handle his mother's misunderstanding and extract myself from the situation with my clearance intact. But 18 years of subtle dismissal had built up behind my teeth, and Marjorie's smile had gone from condescending to triumphant. I don't work in an office, I said quietly. I run operations. Black operations. The kind that don't make the news because they can't. Marjorie laughed. Oh, Sandra. I'm sure what you do feels very important. What's your code name? Nathan asked suddenly. His mother frowned. What? If she's running operations, she has a code name. What is it? He was giving me an out, I realized. A chance to de-escalate by staying vague. But Marjorie's expression had shifted from condescending to openly mocking, and something in me decided she'd earned the truth. Oracle 9, I said. Nathan went absolutely still. His face drained of color so fast I briefly worried about his blood pressure. The fork in his hand clattered onto his plate. Mom, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Stop talking right now. But Marjorie was already laughing, missing entirely the change in her son's demeanor. Oracle 9? That sounds like something from a movie. Mom. Please. Nathan's voice carried a note I'd never heard before. Fear. What? It's ridiculous. Sandra's sitting here pretending she's some kind of, she outranks everyone at this table, Nathan said. Everyone I've ever served with. Everyone I'll ever serve with. Mom, you need to stop talking right now. Marjorie's laugh died in her throat. She looked between Nathan and me, confusion replacing her certainty. What are you talking about? Nathan's hands were shaking slightly. I noticed because I notice everything. Oracle 9 isn't a code name. It's a call sign. It means she's running theater-level intelligence operations. It means she's probably cleared higher than my commanding officer. It means he stopped, running his hand over his face. Mom, I can't even tell you what it means because I don't have the clearance to know what she actually does. That's absurd. She's my niece. I've known her since she was born. And I'm your son, and I'm telling you to stop. Nathan's voice was hard now, the tone he probably used with subordinates who were about to do something catastrophically stupid. Please. Marjorie turned to me, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder. Is this true? Are you really this Oracle person? Yes, I said simply. Then why have you never said anything? Why let everyone think you're just doing administrative work? Because operational security matters more than your opinion of my career, I said. The words came out colder than I'd intended, but I was done managing her feelings. My mother made a soft sound of distress. Sandra. No, I want to know. Marjorie's voice was rising. If you're so important, why all the secrecy? Why not just tell us? Because people like you don't need to know, I said. The work I do stays classified for a reason. It's not about impressing family members at dinner parties. People like me? Marjorie's face flushed. I'm your aunt. I've supported you your entire career. You've minimized my career for 18 years, I corrected. Every promotion, every assignment, every achievement, you've dismissed them as administrative fluff while celebrating Nathan's accomplishments. Because Nathan's accomplishments are visible. He's earned medals, commendations, so have I said quietly. You've just never seen them because they're classified. The last operation I ran prevented a coordinated attack on 3 U.S. embassies. Before that, I dismantled a weapons trafficking network that was supplying IEDs to insurgents. I've been deployed to 17 countries, worked with every special operations unit in the DoD, and briefed the National Security Council 4 times. But sure, I'm just a glorified secretary. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the sound of traffic outside seemed to fade away. Nathan was staring at his plate. My mother had tears in her eyes. Marjorie looked like I'd slapped her. I didn't know, she said finally. You didn't want to know, I replied. You wanted me to be what you decided I was. It was easier than accepting that maybe you didn't understand what I did. If you'd just told me, I couldn't tell you. That's what classified means. And even if I could have, you wouldn't have believed me. You wanted Nathan to be the hero and me to be the support staff. It fit your narrative better. Marjorie stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I think you should leave. Marge, my mother started, but Marjorie cut her off. No. She comes into my home, to my dinner table, and insults me. Accuses me of not supporting her. After everything I've done for her. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. Thank you for dinner. Sandra, wait. Nathan was on his feet too. Mom, you're being stay out of this, Nathan. I won't. She's right. You've been dismissive of her career for years. I've heard you do it. And now that you know the truth, you're kicking her out instead of apologizing. She doesn't get to talk to me that way in my own home. She told you the truth, Nathan said. That's all she did. I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack. My mother followed me to the door, her face stricken. Honey, maybe if you just know, I said gently. I'm done explaining myself to someone who doesn't want to understand. I drove home in silence, my hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline still flooding my system. It wasn't the confrontation itself that bothered me. I'd handled worse in interrogation rooms, boardrooms, and combat zones. It was the weight of 18 years of minimized accomplishments finally coming to the surface. Oracle 9. The call sign I'd earned after running a successful operation in Syria that extracted 3 captured NATO intelligence officers. The designation meant I had tactical command authority over special operations units, that I could authorize missions worth millions of dollars, that I briefed generals and admirals on threat assessments that shaped military strategy. And my aunt thought I pushed papers. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. I'm sorry. I tried to warn her. I didn't respond. What was there to say? At home, I poured another glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the base in the distance. The classified folders in my safe contained details of operations that would never make the news, names of assets whose lives depended on my discretion, intelligence assessments that predicted threats months before they materialized. Important work. Essential work. Work that had cost me relationships, sleep, and pieces of my peace of mind. But to Marjorie, I was just a glorified secretary. The anger had faded by the time I finished my wine. What remained was clarity. I'd spent 18 years trying to maintain a relationship with someone who fundamentally didn't respect what I did. Not because she was malicious, but because she decided what my career was worth without ever asking questions. Without ever considering that the secrecy itself might indicate significance. I thought about the moment Nathan's face had changed. The recognition, the fear. He understood what Oracle 9 meant because he operated in that world. He'd seen the intelligence briefings, worked with people who had clearances like mine, understood the weight of classification. His mother didn't, and more importantly, she hadn't wanted to. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Please call me when you can. Marge is very upset. I deleted the message. The next morning, I was back on base at 0500 hours, reviewing intelligence reports from overnight operations. Major Renee Park dropped a folder on my desk and whistled low. You look like you got into a fight with a brick wall. Family dinner, I said. Say no more. Renee had her own stories about relatives who didn't understand classified work. What happened? My aunt called me a glorified secretary in front of her SEAL son. Renee's eyes widened. Please tell me you corrected her. I gave her my call sign. Oracle 9. Renee started laughing. Oh God. What did the SEAL do? Went pale and told his mother to stop talking. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Renee sat on the edge of my desk. Let me guess. She still didn't get it. She kicked me out for being disrespectful. Of course she did. Because admitting she was wrong would require acknowledging she's been wrong for years. Renee shook her head. Civilians. I swear, they think anything that doesn't involve a rifle and a uniform photo is clerical work. Nathan understood. He would. Anyone with a clearance above secret understands that the people running intelligence operations are usually scarier than the trigger pullers. No offense to trigger pullers. None taken on their behalf, I said dryly. Colonel Soto appeared in my doorway, his expression serious. Johnson. Brief in 10 minutes. We've got movement on that network in Kabul. Yes, sir. I grabbed my folders and stood. Renee watched me go, calling after me. For what it's worth, I'd take you over a SEAL any day. You're scarier. The brief took 3 hours. We'd identified a new cell operating out of Kabul, funneling money to extremist groups across the region. My analysis had tracked their financial movements through 6 countries, identified their leadership structure, and mapped their communication networks. By the time I finished presenting, Colonel Soto had authorized a joint operation with CIA to dismantle them. Excellent work, Johnson, he said. When can you have the op plan ready? 48 hours, sir. Make it 36. We need to move before they shift locations again. This was my world. Clean analysis, decisive action, tangible results. No one here questioned my competence or reduced my work to administrative tasks. They knew what I was capable of because they'd seen the results. The operations that succeeded, the threats that never materialized, the intelligence that saved lives. I worked through lunch, through dinner, through the evening until my eyes burned from staring at screens. By 2200 hours, I had the operational framework drafted. Another 12 hours would give me the detailed plan Colonel Soto needed. My phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. Please talk to Marge. She's hurt. I set the phone face down and went back to work. The next morning brought more messages. My mother, asking me to call. Marjorie herself, saying we needed to talk. Even a cousin I hadn't heard from in years, telling me I'd been too harsh. I responded to none of them. Instead, I finished the operational plan, presented it to Colonel Soto, and got approval to move forward. The operation would launch in 72 hours. 3 teams, 2 countries, coordinated strikes to take down a network that had been operating with impunity for 18 months. You make this look easy, Renee said, reading through my plan. This is brilliant work, Sandra. It's what I'm trained to do. Yeah, but you're exceptionally good at it. You know that, right? I did know. I'd spent 18 years becoming exceptional at it. 18 years of deployments and briefings and operations that required precision, discretion, and expertise. 18 years that my aunt had reduced to paperwork and administrative tasks. Nathan called that evening. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Sandra, please don't hang up. I'm listening. Mom wants to apologize. Does she actually want to apologize, or does she want me to pretend nothing happened? Silence on the other end. Then, probably the second one if I'm honest. Then no. I figured. Look, I need you to know I've tried explaining to her what Oracle 9 means. She's not getting it. Or she doesn't want to get it. I know. I'm sorry. I should have shut her down years ago when she started making those comments about your career. It's not your responsibility to manage your mother's opinions. Maybe not, but your family. You deserved better. The word family stuck with me after we hung up. What did family mean when it only flowed one direction? When support was conditional on your achievements fitting someone else's narrative? When respect had to be earned through public validation rather than private trust? I'd spent 18 years trying to maintain that connection, accepting the minimization because I valued the relationship. Or I thought I valued it. Maybe what I'd really valued was the idea of it. The aunt who'd been like a second mother, who'd celebrated my childhood achievements, who'd made me feel seen and supported. That person didn't exist anymore if she ever really had. The messages continued over the next week. Marjorie's went from hurt to indignant to guilt-tripping. After everything I've done for you, I didn't raise you to be so cold. Families should be able to forgive each other. I read them with the same clinical detachment I applied to intelligence reports. Manipulative phrasing, deflection of responsibility, appeal to obligation. None of it addressed the actual issue, which was 18 years of disrespect crystallized into one humiliating dinner. My mother called, her voice tired. "Honey, I know you're hurt, but Marge is family." "So am I said. And she spent 18 years telling me my career didn't matter. She didn't understand what you do. You said it yourself, it's classified. She didn't try to understand. That's the difference. She made assumptions and then mocked me for them. She feels terrible. She feels embarrassed. That's not the same as sorry." My mother sighed. "What do you want from her?" "Nothing. That's the point. I'm done wanting her approval or respect or understanding. She doesn't have to care about my career. But I don't have to maintain a relationship with someone who actively diminishes it." "That's very harsh, Sandra." "It's a boundary," I corrected. "There's a difference." The operation in Kabul went off flawlessly. 3 simultaneous raids, 14 arrests, financial networks frozen across 6 countries. The kind of success that would never make the news because acknowledging it would compromise sources and methods. Colonel Soto called it some of the best intelligence work he'd seen in 20 years. "You're up for Lieutenant Colonel next board," he said. "With work like this, you'll make it easily." "Oh, 5. Lieutenant Colonel." Another promotion Marjorie would dismiss as administrative if she ever heard about it. Another achievement that would go uncelebrated in my family because it couldn't be explained. I thought about that as I drove home that night. How much of my career had existed in shadows, not just from enemies, but from the people who were supposed to know me best. How many operations I'd run, how many threats I'd neutralized, how many lives I'd saved, all invisible to the people who thought they knew what I did. It didn't make the work less meaningful. If anything, the secrecy was part of what made it matter. Intelligence work succeeded because it stayed invisible. Because the threats we stopped never materialized. Because the networks we dismantled fell apart quietly. Because the operations we ran left no trace. But it did make family relationships complicated. Renee invited me for drinks that Friday. We sat at a quiet bar off base, the kind where half the patrons had security clearances and nobody asked questions about work. "My sister asked me what I do last week," Renee said. I told her I analyzed data. She said that sounds boring. "What do you actually do?" "Last month? Tracked a cyber intrusion back to a state-sponsored hacking group, identified their methods, and helped FBI shut down their access to DoD networks." Renee took a sip of her beer. "But yeah, totally boring data analysis. My aunt called me a glorified secretary." I heard. Stories made the rounds. "You're kind of a legend now." I groaned. "Great. No, seriously. You gave her Oracle 9 and her Seal Sun went white. That's beautiful. Pure poetry." It was petty. It was honest. There's a difference. Renee leaned back. "You know what I think? I think we apologize too much for doing important work. Like we're supposed to be humble about the fact that we're good at our jobs. That we've earned our clearances and our ranks and our responsibilities. Your aunt wanted you to be small. You showed her you weren't. That's not petty. That's just truth. She kicked me out of her house. Because the truth made her uncomfortable. That's on her, not you." I thought about that. About how much energy I'd spent over 18 years making other people comfortable with my career. Downplaying achievements, staying vague about deployments, accepting minimization because explaining felt impossible. How much of myself I'd compressed to fit into Marjorie's narrative of who I was supposed to be. "I'm not going back," I said. To her house. To pretending I'm less than I am. To accepting dismissal because it's easier than demanding respect. Renee raised her glass. "About damn time." The weeks passed. Marjorie's messages grew less frequent, then stopped entirely. My mother occasionally mentioned her, testing whether I'd softened. I hadn't. Nathan checked in regularly, updating me on his training cycles, never pressuring me to reconcile with his mother. She's struggling with it, he said during one call. The cognitive dissonance. She built this whole narrative about your career, and now it's collapsed. She doesn't know how to process it. That's not my problem to solve. I know. I'm just saying, she's dealing with it. Good. 3 months after the dinner, I got promoted to lieutenant colonel. The ceremony was small, attended by my immediate chain of command and a few close colleagues. My mother came. Nathan flew in on leave. Marjorie wasn't invited. Colonel Soto pinned the silver oak leaf on my uniform himself. You've earned this 10 times over, Johnson. One of the finest intelligence officers I've had the privilege of commanding. The reception afterward was brief. My mother hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. I'm so proud of you, honey. Thanks, Mom. Marge wanted to come. I didn't invite her. I know. But she wanted me to tell you she's proud too. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd always tried to keep peace, to smooth over conflicts, to maintain family connections no matter the cost. Is she proud of what I've actually done, or proud of the rank because it sounds impressive? My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have an answer. Nathan found me later, 2 beers in hand. Congratulations, Lieutenant Colonel. Thanks. How long are you home? Another week. Then back to the teams. Training or deployment? Can't say. He grinned. But you probably already know. I probably did. Oracle 9 had access to operational schedules across the special operations community. But I wouldn't confirm it. Hope it goes well. Mom's been asking about you. I'm sure she has. She wants to fix this. Does she understand what this is? Nathan took a long drink of his beer. Honestly, I don't think so. I think she understands she was wrong about your career. But I don't think she gets why that matters so much. Why it's not just about one bad dinner. Because it was 18 years of bad dinners. 18 years of being made to feel like my service didn't count. Like I was playing dress up while you were doing real work. I never thought that. I know. But your mother did. And she made sure I knew it. We stood in comfortable silence for a while. Nathan had always been good at silence. The kind of person who understood that not everything needed words. You know what the funny thing is? I said eventually. I didn't need her approval. I knew my work mattered. But I wanted her to see it. I wanted her to understand that what I did was important. Not more important than what you do, just important in its own way. She should have seen it. Yeah, she should have. Work continued. New operations, new threats, new challenges. I ran briefings for visiting generals, coordinated with CIA on joint operations, mentored junior intelligence officers, and continued doing the work that never made headlines. My team dismantled a weapons trafficking network operating out of Eastern Europe. We identified and neutralized a cyber threat targeting military communications. We provided intelligence that prevented 3 separate attacks on U.S. personnel overseas. Important work. Essential work. Work that would never earn public recognition because its success depended on staying invisible. Marjorie sent a letter 6 months after my promotion. Not a text, not an email, an actual letter, handwritten on cream-colored stationery. Dear Sandra, I know I hurt you. I've been thinking about that dinner for months, and I understand now that I was dismissive of your career. I didn't mean to be. I simply didn't understand what you did, and I made assumptions that were unfair. I'm proud of you. I always have been. I hope someday you can forgive me. Love, Aunt Marge. I read it 3 times, looking for the actual apology hidden somewhere in the careful phrasing. It wasn't there. Just acknowledgement of hurt, explanation of ignorance, and a request for forgiveness. No accountability. No recognition of the pattern of behavior. No understanding that the issue wasn't one dinner, but 18 years. I filed the letter away and didn't respond. You could throw her a bone, my mother suggested when I mentioned it. Let her know you received it. Why? Because she's trying. She's trying to make herself feel better. That's different from actually making amends. My mother sighed. You've gotten very hard, Sandra. I've gotten clear about boundaries. Those aren't the same thing. The conversation bothered me though. The suggestion that maintaining a boundary was hardness, that refusing to accept a non-apology was somehow cruel. I thought about it during my run that evening, feet pounding the pavement while my mind worked through the logic. Hardness would be punishing Marjorie, seeking revenge, trying to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. I wasn't doing any of that. I was simply refusing to maintain a relationship that had become one-sided and disrespectful. I was declining to invest energy in someone who'd made clear they didn't value my career or my accomplishments. That wasn't hard. That was healthy. Renee agreed when I vented to her over lunch. Your mom's from a generation that thinks family peace matters more than individual dignity. She wants you to absorb the disrespect so everyone can pretend things are fine. I'm tired of pretending things are fine. Good. You should be. You're a lieutenant colonel running classified operations. You brief generals. You have tactical command authority over special operations units. You've spent nearly 2 decades becoming exceptional at one of the hardest jobs in the military. And your aunt thinks you push papers. Screw that. I feel guilty, though. Of course you do. She trained you to feel guilty. Every dismissive comment, every minimized achievement, that was training you to accept less than you deserve. Renee pointed her fork at me. But you know what? You don't owe her access to your life. You don't owe her forgiveness. You don't owe her anything except basic civility, and even that's debatable. The guilt faded over time. What replaced it was something steadier, certainty. Certainty that I'd made the right choice. That boundaries weren't punishment, but protection. That respect couldn't be demanded, but it also couldn't be optional. A year after the dinner, I was sitting in my office when Nathan called. Hey, got a minute? Always. What's up? I'm at MacDill for a briefing. Ran into Colonel Soto. He speaks very highly of you. He's a good commander. He said you're the best intelligence officer he's worked with in 30 years. Said your operational instincts are uncanny. That's generous of him. Sandra. Nathan's voice was serious. I need you to hear this. What you do matters. I know Mom never understood that. But everyone who works with you knows. The SEALs you've supported, the operations you've planned, the intelligence you've provided, it matters. It saves lives. My throat tightened unexpectedly. Thanks, Nathan. I should have said it years ago. Should have shut Mom down the first time she made one of those comments about desk jobs. I didn't, and I'm sorry. You're not responsible for your mother's opinions. No, but I'm responsible for mine. And my opinion is that you're one of the most competent, capable officers I've ever encountered. Your work has directly supported missions I've run. Intelligence you provided has kept my guys safe. So thank you for your service and for being good at what you do. After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the wall of my office. The commendations I couldn't display publicly. The operation photos that remained classified. The evidence of 18 years of service that existed only in locked safes and encrypted files. It was enough. It had to be enough. Because the people who understood the work, who saw the results, who benefited from the intelligence, they knew. They respected it. And their respect meant more than Marjorie's approval ever could. The story could have ended there. Clean boundaries, professional success, personal peace. But life rarely provides clean endings. 18 months after the dinner, my mother called with news. It's Marge. She's sick. The diagnosis was serious. Cancer, aggressive, poor prognosis. My mother delivered the information in a careful, neutral tone, waiting to see how I'd respond. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I was. Being angry at someone didn't mean wishing them harm. She's been asking for you. Mom. I know. I know you have boundaries. But she's scared, Sandra. And she's family. I thought about it for 3 days. Weighed obligation against self-preservation. Considered whether this changed anything fundamental about our relationship or just added urgency to an already complicated situation. In the end, I went to see her. Not because she deserved it, not because I'd forgiven her, but because I could live with seeing her one more time. I couldn't live with refusing and wondering later if I should have. Marjorie looked smaller in the hospital bed, diminished by illness in ways that had nothing to do with our history. She smiled when I walked in, a tentative expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. Sandra, you came. Mom said you wanted to see me. I did. I do. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Please sit. I sat, keeping my posture neutral, professional. This was a courtesy call, nothing more. I've been thinking a lot, Marjorie began. About that dinner. About everything I said. Okay, I was wrong. Not just wrong, I was cruel. I diminished your career because I didn't understand it, and I didn't try to understand it because it was easier to assume I knew what you did. I waited. There had to be more. Nathan explained what Oracle 9 means, or what he could explain without violating security clearances. He said you have authority over operations he could only dream of running. He said people with your clearance level usually brief presidents. She looked at me, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry for not seeing you clearly. The apology landed differently than the letter had. Maybe because death puts things in perspective. Maybe because she'd had time to actually think instead of just react. Maybe because Nathan had spent a year and a half patiently explaining things she should have tried to understand decades ago. Thank you, I said. Can you forgive me? I considered the question honestly. I can accept your apology. Forgiveness is more complicated. Fair enough. She smiled sadly. I don't deserve easy forgiveness. We talked for an hour. Not about her illness, not about the past, about the present. About my recent promotion to full colonel, which had happened 3 months earlier. About Nathan's upcoming retirement from the teams. About the grandchildren she wished she'd see grow up. When I left, I felt lighter. Not reconciled, not restored to our old relationship, but lighter. The anger had burned out months before, replaced by something like acceptance. She'd been wrong. She'd apologized. I'd set boundaries. We'd all survive. Marjorie died 6 weeks later, surrounded by family. I attended the funeral, stood beside Nathan during the service, and accepted condolences with grace. My mother squeezed my hand afterward. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to her that you visited. It was the right thing to do. She loved you, you know. Even when she didn't show it well. I know. And I did know. Love and respect weren't the same thing. You could love someone and still fail to see them clearly. Still minimize their achievements, still project your expectations onto their reality, still hurt them without meaning to. The funeral reception was subdued. People shared memories of Marjorie, her generosity, her hosting skills, her devotion to family. No one mentioned the complicated relationships, the unresolved tensions, the years of small hurts that accumulated into larger wounds. Funerals weren't for honesty. They were for comfortable myths. Nathan found me on the back porch, escaping the crowd. You doing okay? Yeah. You. I knew it was coming, but it still hit hard. He was quiet for a moment. She did love you. She was just terrible at showing it toward the end. I know. She read your letter. The one you sent after you visited. She read it every day. I'd written it carefully, threading the needle between honesty and kindness. Acknowledging her apology, explaining my boundaries, wishing her peace. It felt important to put things in writing, to leave a record that wasn't just anger and hurt. I'm glad, I said. She told me once, near the end, that she was proud of you. Really proud. Not just of your rank, but of who you'd become. She said you were stronger than she ever was. The words should have felt validating. Instead, they just felt sad. All those years she could have said it, could have shown it, could have seen me clearly, and she'd waited until she was dying to finally understand. Thank you for telling me, I said. We stood together in the fading light, 2 military officers who'd chosen different paths, but ended up in similar places. Understanding sacrifice, embracing duty, serving in ways most people would never see or understand. I'm putting in my retirement papers next month, Nathan said suddenly. 20 years. Yeah, time to do something else. Maybe teach. Maybe consult. Definitely something that doesn't involve getting shot at. You've earned it. So have you. When's your retirement? I laughed. I'm not sure I know how to be anything else. You'll figure it out when the time comes. He looked at me seriously. You know what Mom said was right, though? You are stronger than most people. Stronger than me, probably. Different strengths. Maybe. But you set boundaries and kept them. You demanded respect and didn't back down when it was easier to just give in. That takes guts. We went back inside eventually, rejoining the reception, playing our roles as grieving family members. But Nathan's words stayed with me through the rest of that evening and into the weeks that followed. Strength. Not hardness, not coldness, not cruelty. Strength. The strength to say this isn't acceptable and mean it. The strength to walk away from relationships that diminished rather than supported. The strength to value your own accomplishments even when others couldn't or wouldn't. 3 months after Marjorie's funeral, I was sitting in a classified briefing room at the Pentagon, presenting threat assessments to a room full of flag officers. Colonel Soto introduced me with his characteristic efficiency. Lieutenant Colonel Johnson has been tracking this network for 18 months. Her analysis is impeccable. The brief went well. Questions were sharp but fair. My answers were thorough, backed by solid intelligence. By the time I finished, the Joint Chiefs had authorized a multi-theater operation based entirely on my recommendation. Walking out of the Pentagon that afternoon, I thought about Marjorie. About how she'd never known this version of me existed. The version who briefed generals, who ran operations spanning continents, who made decisions that shaped national security policy. Maybe that was okay. Maybe not everyone needed to see every version of who we were. Maybe it was enough that the people who mattered, my colleagues, my commanders, the people I served with, understood and respected the work. I called Nathan from my car. Hey, got a question for you. Shoot. When you were deployed, how did you deal with the fact that most people back home had no idea what you actually did? He was quiet for a moment. I stopped caring what they thought. The guys I served with knew. The missions we ran mattered. That was enough. Yeah, I said. That makes sense. Mom stuff still bothering you? Not bothering me. Just thinking about it. About what she understood versus what she didn't. About whether it mattered. Did it? I thought about that. It mattered at the time. Now? Less so. That's growth, Nathan said. You're allowed to move on. After we hung up, I sat in the Pentagon parking lot for a long time, watching officers and civilians move through their days. All of them carrying stories no one else would fully understand. All of them serving in their own ways, visible or invisible, celebrated or silent. My phone buzzed with a message from Renee. Heard your brief went well. Drinks to celebrate. I smiled and typed back, yes. Pick the place. Life moved forward. It always did. New operations, new threats, new challenges. I continued doing work that mattered, with people who understood its value. I maintained boundaries with family members who struggled to see me clearly. I built relationships with colleagues who respected my expertise. 6 months later, I made full colonel. The promotion ceremony was larger this time, attended by more people, covered with more formality. Colonel Soto had moved on to a new assignment, but he flew back for the ceremony, insisting he wouldn't miss it. You're going places, Sandra, he said afterward. Mark my words, you'll be wearing stars before you retire. I'm not sure about that, sir. I am. You've got the instincts, the experience, and the results. DoD needs more general officers who understand intelligence operations. You'd be perfect. The idea stayed with me. General officer. Oh, 7 or higher. The kind of rank that came with significant responsibility and even more significant pressure. The kind of rank that required sacrificing even more privacy, more time, more pieces of yourself to the mission. I wasn't sure I wanted it. But I also wasn't sure I didn't. That night, I stood in my backyard, looking up at the stars, thinking about Marjorie. She died believing I was important, finally understanding that my work mattered. But she never really understood what the work was. Never knew about the operations I'd run, the threats I'd stopped, the lives I'd saved. And that was okay. Some things weren't meant to be shared. Some accomplishments lived only in classified folders and encrypted files. Some victories were silent, celebrated only by the people who understood what they'd prevented rather than what they'd achieved. My career had taken me places most people would never see, shown me threats most people would never imagine, and given me responsibilities most people couldn't fathom. I'd earned every rank, every clearance, every call sign. I'd paid for them with time and relationships and pieces of my peace of mind. But I'd also built something that mattered. Something that made a difference. Something that would outlast any family drama or personal conflict. Oracle 9. A call sign that meant something to the people who needed to know. A designation that carried weight in the communities where it counted. A symbol of 18 years of exceptional service in work that stayed invisible by design. Marjorie had called me a glorified secretary. She'd been wrong, and she'd eventually understood that. But more importantly, I'd never needed her to be right. I'd known my value all along. I'd just wanted her to see it. In the end, though, her seeing it or not seeing it hadn't changed anything fundamental. The work remained important. The operations continued. The threats were neutralized. And I kept serving, kept analyzing, kept providing the intelligence that kept people safe. Some people only understand the worlds they recognize. The rest of us serve where they never look, doing work they'll never see, making a difference they'll never know about. And that's enough. It has to be. Because the work itself is the point, not the recognition. The mission is what matters, not the acknowledgement. The service is its own reward, even when it's invisible. I went back inside, poured a glass of wine, and sat down to review the briefing materials for tomorrow's meeting. Another operation to plan. Another threat to assess. Another day of work that would never make headlines, but would absolutely make a difference. My phone buzzed one more time. Nathan, sending a photo of himself in civilian clothes. First day of retirement. Feels weird, but good. I smiled and typed back, "Congratulations. You earned it." His response came quickly, "So did you. When you're ready." When I was ready. Maybe someday. But not today. Today, there was work to do. Operations to run. Intelligence to analyze. Threats to neutralize. Today, I was Oracle 9, and that was exactly where I needed to be. 15 years later, I stood in the mirror adjusting my dress uniform, running my fingers over the single star on each shoulder. Brigadier General Sandra Johnson. 07. The promotion had come through 6 months ago, and I still wasn't entirely used to the weight of it, not the physical weight of the insignia, but the responsibility it represented. Colonel Soto had been right. I'd made general officer. It had taken another decade of operations, briefings, deployments, and careful navigation of Pentagon politics, but here I was. The first woman to hold this particular position in Air Force intelligence, running strategic operations across 3 theaters. My phone buzzed. Nathan, checking in like he did every few weeks since his retirement. Big day. You ready? Today was the ceremony. Not my promotion ceremony, that had happened months ago in a small, classified event attended only by people with appropriate clearances. No, today was different. Today, the Air Force was dedicating a new intelligence operations center, and I was giving the keynote address. More importantly, the center was being named after Colonel Adrian Soto, who'd passed away 2 years ago from a sudden heart attack. Ready as I'll ever be, I typed back. Wish I could be there. Me too. Nathan had moved to Montana after retirement, bought a small ranch, and was living the quiet life he'd always talked about during deployments. He'd married a woman named Rebecca, a nurse who'd never served but understood what it meant to serve. They had a daughter, Emma, who was now 13 and apparently showing interest in the Naval Academy. Life moved in strange circles that way. I drove to the base, waving at the gate guard who snapped a sharp salute when she saw the star on my vehicle. That still felt surreal too. Being saluted by officers, having people stand when I entered a room, watching colonels who'd once outranked me, defer to my authority. Major General Patricia Reeves met me at the operations center, her 2 stars catching the morning sunlight. She'd been my mentor for the past 7 years, grooming me for exactly this kind of leadership position. Sandra. Good morning. Morning, ma'am. How are you feeling about the speech? Confident. Colonel Soto deserves the recognition, even if most people will never know what he actually did. Patricia smiled. The people who need to know will know. That's what matters. The ceremony started at 10:00 hours. The crowd was smaller than a typical military ceremony, only about 200 people, all with appropriate clearances. No press, no public spectators, no family members who didn't have need to know. This was an intelligence community event, which meant it stayed within the community. I'd written the speech myself, spending weeks getting the balance right. Honoring Colonel Soto's legacy without compromising classified information. Explaining the importance of intelligence work without revealing operational details. Making people understand the significance of what we did while maintaining the secrecy that made our work effective. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the podium and looked out at the audience. Intelligence officers from every branch, CIA personnel, NSA representatives, contractors with top-secret clearances. People who understood the world I'd lived in for 33 years. Colonel Adrian Soto once told me that intelligence work succeeds because it stays invisible, I began. That the best operations are the ones no one ever hears about, because the threats we stop never materialize. The attacks we prevent never happen. The networks we dismantle fall apart quietly, without fanfare or headlines. I paused, letting that sink in. For 32 years, Colonel Soto embodied that principle. He ran operations that saved countless lives. He mentored officers who went on to lead the intelligence community. He made decisions that shaped national security policy in ways the public will never know and can never appreciate. And he did it all without seeking recognition, without demanding acknowledgement, without needing validation from people who couldn't understand the scope of his work. I saw heads nodding throughout the audience. These were my people. They understood. This operations center bears his name because the people in this room know what he accomplished. We know the operations he ran, the threats he neutralized, the lives he saved. We know because we worked beside him, learned from him, and continued the mission he dedicated his life to. And while the world outside these gates will never understand the significance of this dedication, we do. We know. And that's enough. The applause was measured, professional. These weren't people who demonstrated emotion publicly. But I saw the respect in their faces, the understanding in their eyes. They'd all served with people like Colonel Soto. They'd all run operations that would never make headlines. They'd all made sacrifices that would never be publicly acknowledged. After the ceremony, I spent 2 hours doing meet and greets, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on my promotion, answering questions from junior officers who wanted advice on building intelligence careers. It was the part of general officer life I'd had to learn, the visibility, the mentorship expectations, the understanding that my experience now belonged to the next generation. A young Air Force captain approached me nervously. "General Johnson? I'm Captain Lisa Chin. I just wanted to say thank you." "For what, Captain?" "For showing me this career path is possible. I'm in my 4th year as an intelligence officer, and I've been told more times than I can count that women can't do strategic operations, that we're better suited for analytical roles. Seeing you make general officer, running theater operations, it matters." I looked at this young woman, maybe 26 years old, and saw myself 3 decades ago. Confident but uncertain, capable but constantly questioned, determined to prove herself in a field that didn't always welcome women in leadership. "Who told you that?" I asked. "My previous commander. He's not in my chain anymore, but he made it very clear that he thought women lacked the decisiveness for operational command." "And what do you think?" "I think he was wrong. I think I can do this job as well as any man." "Then prove it." "Not to him, not to me, not to anyone else. Prove it to yourself. Run good operations. Make sound decisions. Build expertise that's undeniable. And when people question your capabilities, let your results speak for themselves." She smiled, standing a little straighter. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." Watching her walk away, I thought about all the times I'd faced similar doubts. Not from Marjorie. She'd barely understood enough about my career to question my fitness for it, but from colleagues, commanders, and counterparts who'd assumed my gender meant I couldn't handle high-pressure operations. I'd spent 33 years proving them wrong, one operation at a time. The reception afterward was held in the new operations center's main briefing room, a space that would soon be filled with classified displays and operational planning materials. Right now, it was just empty walls and a few tables with refreshments. Patricia found me again, this time with a man I didn't immediately recognize. He was wearing civilian clothes, but carried himself like military. "Sandra, this is James Mitchell. He worked with Colonel Soto 20 years ago when you were still a major." Recognition clicked. "The Yemen operation. You were CIA." James smiled. "Good memory. I heard you made general. Congratulations." "Thank you. Adrian spoke highly of you. Said you had the best operational instincts he'd ever seen." I see he was right. We talked for a few minutes about Colonel Soto, sharing stories that would never leave this room. Operations in Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. Intelligence work that had prevented attacks, disrupted networks, and saved lives. Work that had cost all of us pieces of ourselves, sleep, relationships, certainty about the world. "He'd be proud of you," James said before leaving. "He always said you'd make general officer. Said you understood that intelligence work isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about asking the right questions and trusting your team to find the answers. After the reception, I drove to a small cemetery outside the city. Colonel Soto was buried there, in a plot with a simple headstone that listed his rank, his years of service, and nothing else. No mention of the operations he'd run, the threats he'd stopped, the lives he'd saved. Just a name, rank, and dates. I stood in front of his grave for a long time, thinking about mentorship and legacy. About how he'd taken me seriously as a young lieutenant colonel when others had dismissed me. How he'd pushed me to develop my operational instincts, trusted me with increasingly complex operations, and advocated for my promotion even when it meant losing his best intelligence officer to a new assignment. "They named the operations center after you," I said quietly. "You'd hate the attention, but it's done. And Captain Chin just told me you're the reason she joined Air Force Intelligence. Something you said during a recruiting event 7 years ago. So your influence outlasted you, just like you always said good intelligence work should." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees around the cemetery. I'd never been religious, never believed in signs or messages from beyond. But standing there, I felt at peace with the choices I'd made, the career I'd built, the boundaries I'd maintained. Marjorie had been dead for 15 years. The anger I'd felt toward her had faded long ago, replaced by something like understanding. She'd been limited by her own experiences, unable to see beyond what she recognized. That wasn't malice. It was just human nature. People understood what they could see, and intelligence work was designed to stay invisible. My mother had passed away 5 years ago, peacefully in her sleep. We'd reconciled after Marjorie's death, though our relationship had never quite returned to its earlier warmth. Some boundaries, once established, became permanent features of the landscape. Nathan was one of the few family members I'd stayed close with. He understood the military life in ways civilians couldn't. Understood the sacrifices, the secrets, the cost of service. Our quarterly phone calls were easy, comfortable, filled with the kind of shorthand that came from shared experience. I got back in my car and drove to my office at the Pentagon. Even as a general officer, I still spent most of my time analyzing threats, planning operations, and briefing senior leadership. The rank had changed, but the work remained fundamentally the same, trying to see threats before they materialized, trying to prevent attacks before they happened, trying to keep people safe in ways they'd never know about. My assistant, a sharp lieutenant colonel named David Park, met me at my office door. "General, you have 3 messages from CENTCOM, 1 from NSA, and the DNI's office called about tomorrow's briefing." "Thanks, David. Give me 30 minutes, then we'll start with CENTCOM." I sat at my desk, looking at the photos on the wall. Me with Colonel Soto at my lieutenant colonel promotion. Me with Patricia Reeves at a classified ceremony in Germany. Me with Nathan at his retirement party. A career documented in images that showed uniforms and ranks, but revealed nothing about the actual work. There was one new photo, added just last month. Me shaking hands with the president in the Oval Office after briefing him on a successful operation in North Africa. An operation that had taken 18 months of planning, involved coordination with 5 allied intelligence services, and prevented what would have been a catastrophic attack on European targets. The president had thanked me personally, told me the nation owed me a debt that could never be publicly acknowledged. I'd responded with the same words I'd used 1,000 times before, "Just doing my job, sir." Because that's what it was. My job. The work I'd chosen 33 years ago when I'd commissioned as a second lieutenant, young and idealistic and certain I could make a difference. The work I'd committed to through promotions and deployments, through operations that succeeded and ones that failed, through relationships that ended and boundaries that hardened. David knocked on my door exactly 30 minutes later. "General? CENTCOM is on the secure line." I picked up the phone and dove back into the work. An emerging threat in the Middle East. New intelligence from signals intercepts. Questions about operational capabilities and timeline feasibility. The kind of conversation I'd been having for 3 decades, just with more authority and responsibility behind my answers now. The day stretched long. Briefings, phone calls, secure video conferences with commanders across 3 time zones. I approved 2 operations, redirected resources on a 3rd, and shut down a 4th that had too many variables and not enough intelligence support. The work of a general officer, making decisions that affected hundreds of people, millions of dollars, and potentially thousands of lives. By 1800 hours, I was exhausted. David appeared in my doorway with a knowing look. General, you've been here since 0700. Everything else can wait until tomorrow. There's still the D&I briefing to prep, which you could do in your sleep at this point. Go home. That's an order from your assistant. I smiled. You can't order a general officer. Watch me. Go home, ma'am. I drove to my house in Arlington, a small 2-bedroom place I'd bought 5 years ago when the Pentagon assignment became permanent. It was quiet, clean, and exactly what I needed after long days of high-pressure decisions. I poured a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, watching the sun set over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Em wants to know what it's like being a general. I told her to ask you directly. Her number is 406-555-0147. Fair warning, she doesn't understand the concept of operational security yet. I laughed and saved Emma's number. Maybe I'd call her this weekend, try to explain what general officer life was like in terms a 13-year-old could understand. Though honestly, I wasn't sure I could explain it in terms I fully understood myself. The weight of responsibility. The constant awareness that decisions I made could mean life or death for people I'd never meet. The isolation that came with senior leadership, fewer peers, fewer people who understood the pressure, fewer opportunities to just be Sandra instead of General Johnson. But also the satisfaction. Knowing the work mattered. Seeing operations succeed because of good intelligence. Mentoring younger officers and watching them grow into capable leaders. Making a difference in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged, but were no less real for their invisibility. My phone rang. Patricia Reeves. Sandra. Sorry to bother you after hours. You're not bothering me, ma'am. What's up? I got the briefing materials for tomorrow's D&I meeting. Your threat assessment on the Eastern European networks is excellent. Best analysis I've seen in years. Thank you, ma'am. I'm serious. You've got a gift for seeing patterns others miss. It's why I pushed so hard for your promotion. The intelligence community needs more general officers who actually understand intelligence operations, not just administration. After we hung up, I thought about that. Understanding intelligence operations. That had been the core of my entire career, not just analyzing data, but understanding how pieces fit together, how threats evolved, how operations needed to adapt to changing circumstances. It was the same skill I'd tried to explain to Marjorie 15 years ago, when she dismissed my career as paperwork and administrative tasks. The same expertise Nathan had recognized immediately when I'd said Oracle 9. The same capability that had earned me promotion after promotion, clearance after clearance, responsibility after responsibility. I'd built a career on being good at something most people would never understand. On developing expertise in a field that stayed invisible by design. On making decisions that mattered deeply but would never be publicly celebrated. And I'd built it despite family members who couldn't see it, colleagues who doubted me, and a culture that sometimes struggled to accept women in strategic leadership roles. I'd built it through competence, determination, and a willingness to set boundaries with people who didn't respect the work. Marjorie would have been shocked to see me now. A general officer, running theater-level operations, briefing the president. The niece she'd called a glorified secretary had become one of the most senior intelligence officers in the United States military. But more than that, I'd become someone who understood her own worth. Someone who didn't need external validation to know her work mattered. Someone who'd learned that respect couldn't be demanded, but also couldn't be optional in relationships that mattered. I'd learned that lesson the hard way at a dinner table 15 years ago when I'd finally drawn a line. When I'd refused to accept dismissal and diminishment. When I'd chosen dignity over family peace. It had been the right choice. I knew that now with certainty. The years since had proven it. I'd flourished professionally, grown personally, and built relationships with people who saw me clearly and valued what I brought to their lives. Nathan. Patricia. Colonel Soto before he died. Dozens of colleagues and mentors who'd understood the work, respected the expertise, and treated me as an equal. Those relationships had sustained me through deployments and operations, through promotions and setbacks, through the long years of service that had brought me here. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Captain Chin, thanking me for the advice and asking if I'd be willing to mentor her through the next phase of her career. I replied immediately, yes. Let's set up a monthly call. Send me your schedule. Because that was part of the responsibility now. Not just running operations and briefing senior leaders, but bringing the next generation along. Making sure young officers like Captain Chen had the support and guidance I'd received from people like Colonel Soto. Making sure they understood that intelligence work mattered, even when it stayed invisible. That their contributions were essential, even when they couldn't be publicly acknowledged. That they could build careers that made a real difference, even if their families never fully understood what they did. The sun had fully set by the time I went back inside. I had emails to answer, briefing materials to review, decisions to make. But for a moment, I just stood in my kitchen, glass of wine in hand, and let myself feel satisfied with the life I'd built. 33 years of service. 18 years since that dinner with Marjorie. 15 years since her death. And here I was, Brigadier General Sandra Johnson, still running operations, still making a difference, still serving in ways most people would never see or understand. Some people only understand the worlds they recognize. The rest of us serve where they never look, doing work they'll never see, making a difference they'll never know about. I'd made peace with that years ago. Had learned to find meaning in the work itself, rather than external recognition. Had built a life around service that mattered more than acknowledgement. And standing in my kitchen, uniform jacket draped over a chair, star still gleaming on the shoulder, I knew I'd made the right choices. Every boundary I'd set, every operation I'd run, every promotion I'd earned, it had all led here. To a career that mattered. To work that made a difference. To a life lived on my own terms, with dignity intact and respect earned. Marjorie had called me a glorified secretary. She'd been wrong. But more importantly, her being wrong hadn't changed anything fundamental about who I was or what I'd accomplished. I was Oracle 9. I was Brigadier General Sandra Johnson. I was a woman who'd spent 33 years serving her country in ways most people would never understand. And that was more than enough. It was everything. Tomorrow I'd brief the DNI, make decisions that affected operations across 3 theaters, and continue doing the work that had defined my adult life. But tonight, I'd sit with the satisfaction of a career well built, a life well lived, and boundaries well maintained. I raised my wine glass in a silent toast. To Colonel Soto, who'd believed in me. To Nathan, who'd understood. To Captain Chen and all the young officers following behind. To everyone who'd served in the shadows, doing work that mattered without needing recognition. And to myself, for having the strength to demand respect, the courage to set boundaries, and the commitment to build a career that made a real difference. 33 years. Hundreds of operations. Countless threats prevented. And one fundamental truth that had sustained me through it all, the work itself is the point, not the recognition. The mission is what matters, not the acknowledgement. The service is its own reward, even when it's invisible. Especially when it's invisible. I finished my wine, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new operations, new decisions. But tonight, I slept soundly, secure in the knowledge that I'd earned every star on my shoulder and every ounce of respect that came with them. The rest was just noise. And I'd learned long ago to filter out noise and focus on signal. It's what made me good at my job. It's what made me who I was. General Sandra Johnson. Oracle 9. A woman who understood her worth and refused to accept anything less than the respect she'd earned. That was legacy enough. So that's how one dinner conversation rewrote the entire dynamic of my family. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of clarity to realize you've been giving too much to people who give nothing back. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Have you ever had someone underestimate you until the truth finally came out? And did you keep them in your life afterward or walk away? Let me know in the comments. If you want more true stories about standing up for yourself, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your story matters, and you're not alone.